So what does it take to build a new financial system for an entire continent? I mean, think about it. It would have to be so secure, so absolutely trustworthy that it could handle a mandate worth trillions upon trillions of dollars. Well, today, we're diving into the architecture of the institution designed to do exactly that. This is the story of the Pan-African Court. Yeah, just let that number sink in for a second. $24 trillion. That's the estimated value of the mineral wealth this new court is set up to oversee, with something called a Master Sovereign Investment Agreement. A number that big, it's almost hard to wrap your head around, right? And it demands more than just a new court building. It demands a totally new way of thinking about justice itself, one that's as solid and as verifiable as the gold and minerals it's protecting. And those words come from the architect of this whole vision, David Okiki Amayo Jr. His quote really nails the core idea we're going to unpack here today, this powerful fusion of legal principles, immense natural resources, and cutting-edge technology. The goal? To create an entirely new kind of sovereign power. All right, so how does this whole thing actually work? Here's the game plan. We're going to start with the sheer scale of this vision. Then, we'll get into the big problem it's trying to solve. We'll look at its two main pillars, the law and the code, and see how it all works in practice. We'll trace its path from an idea to a real thing. And at the end, we'll ask a pretty big question about what this all means for the future of governance. Okay, so let's jump in. At its very heart, the Pan-African Court is built to be the supreme judicial authority for what's called the African Federation Treaty Framework, or AFTF. Now, this isn't just another regional committee. You've got to think of this as the foundational legal plumbing, the very substrate for an entire continent's economic future.
So its number one job is to provide the one thing big investors crave more than anything else: certainty. They have a term for it: jurisdictional finality. That sounds complicated, but it's simple. Instead of trying to deal with 54 different legal systems, all with their own rules and politics, this court creates a single, predictable place where the buck stops. The ultimate goal is to transform Africa from a collection of separate markets into one unified sovereign economic bloc, unlocking investment on a scale that was pretty much impossible before.
But that brings up a really important question. Why build something so radical? Why is a whole new system even necessary? Well, the truth is, for decades, development finance has been stuck in a loop, hitting the same systemic failures over and over again, holding back incredible potential.
And this slide, wow, this really lays it all out. It gets right to the heart of the problem. On the left, you've got the old way, with its fatal flaws, money that just vanishes, incentives that reward just spending money, not actually getting things done, and a huge lack of real data, which makes everything seem riskier than it should be. But then, look to the right. Technology has an answer for every single one of those problems. Transparency, so you can follow the money. Milestone-based payments, so you only pay for success. And a perfect, unchangeable record of everything, so everyone is looking at the same set of facts.
So how in the world do you actually build a system like that? Well, it all rests on two incredibly powerful pillars. First, you've got a legal framework that establishes the ultimate authority. And second, you have a technological platform that enforces that authority with cold, hard, mathematical precision. The legal engine here is something called the supremacy override. It's right there in Article 13 of the treaty, and it basically gives the Pan-African Court the final word. It ensures that when it comes to the big stuff, we're talking strategic minerals, defense, finance, there is one law that stands above all others. This is the absolute bedrock that creates that stable, predictable environment for investment.
And the other pillar? That's the tech. It's a sovereign blockchain platform called Ndege, and the best way to think about it is as the central nervous system for this entire project. It's the tamper-proof digital ledger where the court's decisions become reality, handling the settlement and verification for that entire $24 trillion mandate. This is where you go from legal theory to what its creators call algorithmic jurisprudence, where the rules of justice are literally written into the code itself.
Okay, algorithmic jurisprudence sounds pretty futuristic, right? But what does it actually look like in practice? Well, it completely changes the game for how big development projects get funded and managed. The whole point is to engineer human error and corruption right out of the system from the very beginning. The process is brilliant, really. It's called milestone finance. So instead of getting a giant lump of cash up front, the project funds get locked in a secure digital escrow, a smart contract. Then let's say you finish the foundation for a new hospital. You submit digital proof. An independent auditor verifies that proof on the blockchain, and only then, boom, the funds for that specific milestone are released to you automatically. No delays, no middlemen, no questions asked.
And that shift, right there, from a system based on trust to a system based on evidence, that's the real innovation. It tackles what's often called the African risk premium head-on. By creating a guarantee that money goes exactly where it's supposed to for work that's actually been done, it dramatically lowers the risk for investors. Suddenly, huge, important infrastructure projects that were once considered too risky or unbankable become totally viable, all because the system is built on verifiable, cryptographic truth.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. This is an incredibly ambitious blueprint. It sounds almost like science fiction. But here's the thing. It's already moving from just a theory into a functional reality. And it's backed by some very serious validation at the highest levels.
And yeah, this isn't just some concept sketched out on a white paper. The framework that this court is built on has been through the ringer. It's received formal, written feedback and technical validation from 11 sitting African ministers of defense and finance. That is huge. It means the architecture isn't just technically sound, it's been designed to be politically and strategically viable right from day one.
And there's a clear, step-by-step roadmap to bring it all to life. Right now, the court is in its testing phase at the Nairobi Judicial Secretariat. The next massive step is to physically move the OmniJIT-Zara supercomputer to the Northlands Special Economic Zone. Now, that's not just a tech upgrade, it's a huge strategic move. It's about putting the computational brain of the system right next to the vaulted mineral reserves that back the entire financial structure. And long-term, the vision is to integrate all of this with the existing African court into an enhanced institution based in Arusha.
So when you put all these pieces together, you've got the legal framework, the cutting-edge technology, the buy-in from ministers, and a clear roadmap. What does the future that this is building actually look like?
What we're really looking at is a totally new model of governance, one that's purpose-built for the 21st century. It's a vision where a continent's incredible mineral wealth is secured by law and then activated by technology. It creates a system where justice isn't just something that's debated in a courtroom, it's something that's executed instantly and transparently on a blockchain, forging a new and incredibly powerful form of economic sovereignty.
And that brings us to one last really profound question to think about. This whole architecture merges the ancient principles of law with the absolute logic of computer code. And it raises some fundamental questions about governance itself. You know, if justice can be automated, if it can be transparent, if it can be guaranteed by an algorithm, what does that mean for our traditional understanding of what it even means to be a nation-state?